From the bleachers to the bar, this is the Home Runs and Handshakes podcast. All right, friends, welcome in. This is the first ever Thursday edition of Home Runs and Handshakes. This is episode 10, the Ron Santo edition of the podcast. Joining me today is Jed the Destroyer, otherwise known as Frank Nova, and I am the future Pacific Coast League champion, James Neveau. And Frank and I are going to take our podcast name a little bit literally today because it was trade deadline day. Frank and I, frankly, we're dissatisfied with the ultimate outcome of the trade deadline for the Cubs. And so to kind of drown out our sorrows here, we are going to raise a toast of delicious, delightful Malort to you, our listeners, and to each other. Cheers, Frank.
Zobrist.
The nectar of the gods, I will call that.
Tastes like victory.
You know what? It shouldn't taste like victory. It should taste like a job, I would say, not completed. I think that, and Claire is going nuts in our chat that neither of us flinched. Claire, we are professionals, dude. Like, that is what we do. For those of you who are not watching the podcast, Frank and I did just take shots of Malort on camera. Claire said we didn't flinch. Again, we're pros, and I kind of like this stuff. Like, I have grown to appreciate its subtleties and flavors over the years, and people look at me like I'm nuts, but like, look, this bottle, this has been a James production, dude. I've taken shots of this bottle throughout the season. Like, this is my doing. My liver has paid the price for what this Cubs team has done, and Frank feels the same way I do.
Yeah, and I mean, Malort looms large in my legend. I actually had I had a little plastic bottle of homemade Malort made by none other than Sam Meckling, who was the genius behind the original Jeppson's Malort social media, and he made Malort what it is today.
Yep.
It went from being the dusty bottle on the bottom shelf at the Elks Lodge to being the requisite shot in the city of Chicago.
And what's really cool, I don't know how many people know the story about this, but my first ever shot of Malort was purchased for me by one Frank Nova at a hockey night event way back in the day. So anything that followed, I guess, can blame you for that, Frank.
Oh, look, these little shooter bottles are invaluable. I have Malorted people inside Walt Disney World with these little shooter bottles.
I've taken Malort shots in a lot of places. Every time I go travel for a Cubs game nowadays, I'm bringing this along with me, and I'm taking shots and forcing people to to take care of that business for themselves. So, yeah, definitely a very, very interesting day for the Cubs. We're going to get into, of course, all of it. They did make several moves prior to the deadline, but I think, Frank, I hate doing this because I am nothing if not an optimist. I think that a lot of folks definitely know that about me. I consider myself one. But I just have to say, like, the moves themselves that the Cubs made, and we will, again, get into them, I thought they were solid moves. Like, you can justify any of the moves they made. The cost wasn't too high. They definitely paid fair value for the pieces that they got. But ultimately, at the end of the day, this is a team that had one glaring need at the trade deadline. And I know, like, third base, relief pitching, you can kind of say whatever you want about those. The glaring need, the single biggest need the Cubs had was to go get a starting pitcher, and they did not do it. You can say Mike Soroka is a starting pitcher. I do not view him that way. I do not think the Cubs should view him that way. This was essentially the equivalent of giving a grocery list to Peter Griffin and him bringing back a bunch of Legos. You cannot possibly have anticipated any other outcome related to that. And I think that a lot of the ire, a lot of the anger that Cubs fans feel toward this trade deadline right now is going to be aimed right at that. And they are completely within their bounds to say that. And I personally am pissed off by the way that Jed Hoyer handled this trade deadline.
Well, the first question you have to ask yourself, because Jed Hoyer got a brand new contract, and why did he get the contract? What is the metric that measures success for the ownership of the Chicago Cubs?
It's money, Frank. It's money.
That's the thing. All Jed Hoyer's mission to make the Ricketts family happy is to do exactly what the Cubs are doing this year, which is they're having a good regular season. The stands are packed. People are buying beer outside the ballpark. Gallagher Way, which Gallagher Way is a different corporate entity than the Chicago Cubs. So
Mhm.
all the money that the Ricketts family makes at Gallagher Way does not go into MLB revenue sharing. All the rooftop revenue does not go into MLB revenue sharing. Every dollar that the Ricketts family makes outside of Wrigley Field does not go into revenue sharing. They are making a goddamn fortune off this team. So Jed Hoyer is helping drive that revenue. Winning the World Series doesn't matter. Driving the revenue matters.
Mhm.
And it's been painfully obvious for a long time. They want fans in the snakes. They want good vibes, all that crap. They don't want to win. Jed Hoyer does not want to win the World Series. Or I'm sure to sound like Shorzy, it's not that he doesn't like winning. He doesn't hate to lose.
Mm.
And that is the huge difference between him and Theo Epstein. Theo Epstein hated losing. Theo Epstein wanted to win the World Series. That was his goal. He achieved it. Hoyer was along for the ride, but it was Theo Epstein who won that World Series.
Mhm.
Since he's been gone, Jed Hoyer has spent his entire tenure as Cubs general manager basically going to other teams and getting, giving them 2 10s for a 5. And he did that again today because, okay, sure, all of the guys they got were okay.
Yeah.
They got okay. You don't win the World Series with okay, but if you
No.
don't care about winning the World Series, okay is good enough.
See, and where I'll tell you that, Frank, is that you can use okay to get to the playoffs. Like that is 1,000% a fact of life. You need depth to get to the playoffs. The Cubs are currently in the process of shuffling through their bullpen. We already saw them say goodbye to Chris Flexen. One of the corresponding moves they made today was saying goodbye to Ryan Pressly. Like that is something you have to do. You have to be willing to cut bait with players in order to reach that next level and to get into the playoffs. But your point about those moves not being predicated and aimed at winning a World Series is so accurate. You know what kind of moves win you a World Series? What the New York Yankees went out and did today. They got not one, but two closing pitchers today. They went out and got Duvall. They went out and they got Bednar from the Pirates. They went out and did something serious. Hell, the Tampa Bay Rays not only held on to Pete Fairbanks today, they went out and got Griffin Jax, who was going to potentially be a really strong reliever in this league. They went out and got him. The New York Mets got multiple closer caliber pitchers. What did the Cubs do? Okay, we can get into the moves now because this is kind of where this conversation is going. Yeah, they went out and they got a couple of really solid, what I would consider to be good bullpen arms. They went out and got Taylor Rogers from the Pirates, who had literally just been traded yesterday. I love the fact that he
Pirates legend
bounce around the National League Central, apparently. And they also got Andrew Kittredge from the Orioles. And now those two moves, both solid moves, right? Like those are guys they're going to be able to pitch you some decent innings. No, they're not the highest leverage guys in the world, but the important thing for both of them is that those two guys are potentially going to give you solid innings. They're going to strike guys out. They're going to induce ground balls. Like that's the kind of thing they do. They induce that swing and miss. And I know that's what the Cubs were so sorely lacking from a guy like Ryan Pressly. And so I think it's very important to replace him with a guy like that. But neither one of those guys is quite the needle mover that some of these other closers, the Durans of the world, the Griffin Jaxes of the world, the Duvalls of the world, the Helsleys of the world, for God's sake. Mason Miller got traded today. And God, Dick swinging AJ Preller does it again, man. I swear, every trade deadline, like he would trade his kidney. He would trade a child for the trade deadline to last an hour longer so that he could continue doing moves like this. I want that kind of a gunslinger at Wrigley Field. I do not want, staid accountant Jed Hoyer at the helm of this thing. And yeah, he's got this team within a game of a division lead. Like that's great. Good regular season team Jed Hoyer has put together here. He has gone out and gotten some really solid pieces for this team. But if you really look at it and you say to yourself, has he made the moves that he has needed to go out and win the World Series? Did he go out and get Max Fried last year when all it would have taken would have been money to go get him? No. Did he do that to Alex Bregman? No, yeah, he went out and got Kyle Tucker, certainly, but this year had all sorts of opportunities to make other additions to this team. Even rental guys, even dudes like Merrill Kelly would have potentially gotten this team closer to potentially qualifying for and winning a World Series. And instead, Jed Hoyer just kind of half-assed everything again. And I completely understand why Cub fans are going to be ticked off about that.
And I'll tell you another fallout from this is the Cubs do have a certain superstar on an expiring contract who also was watching what his old team did and what
Yep.
his current team is doing, and he's saying, okay, there are two ways to approach the trade deadline when you're in a pennant race, and which one do you want to sign up? Which one do you want to sign up for the next 12 years? It's not the Cubs. You can, after today, kiss Kyle Tucker goodbye, unless Kyle Tucker has somehow just become completely overcome with an unbridled love for the city of Chicago and can only have hot dogs with celery salt for the rest of his life. He's gone. There's no way he's looking at this and saying, I want 12 more years of this, especially because Hoyer just signed an extension. So this
Yep.
is going to be the Cubs' reality for the foreseeable future. If I'm Kyle Tucker, I can't get out of Chicago fast enough after
I don't want any part of that. And like, yeah, money talks, certainly. And I think that lack of travel talks. We've talked about the way Jamison Taillon has talked about the Cubs, where he loves the fact that they're kind of in the middle of the country and they don't really have the grueling travel of everybody else. You do have the day game thing. That is a little bit of a factor still. Not as big as it used to be, obviously. They play so many more night games at home than they used to. And that is not nearly the concern that it used to be. But again, you're right, Frank. You look at what the Cubs did today and you compare it to what, say, the Phillies did or the Mets did or hell, the Padres. The Padres who literally were like, yeah, we're going to kind of buy, we're going to kind of sell. We're just going to make moves, baby. That's all we're going to do. The Padres are never satisfied with good enough. And that's the kind of attitude that ultimately is going to win you a World Series. And I know there are going to be people out there and be like, hey, how many World Series have the Padres won since AJ Preller started throwing, money around and players around? It doesn't matter. They're in that dance every time and they take the big swings that are required to win. The Houston Astros went out and got Carlos Correa. They paid a ton of money for an Isaac Paredes insurance policy today. That's what they did. And then you had teams like the Phillies again who went out and got talent at multiple positions, including closer. God, their bullpen is going to be something to contend with down the stretch. The Padres have a hell of a bullpen now. Hell, they have an even better rotation because they went out and got, more starting pitching help and kept Dylan Cease. It is unbelievable to me that all of these teams really made these massive strides forward. And Jed Hoyer can sit there all he wants and say to himself, well, the market just wasn't there. Not that many guys moved, blah, blah, blah. I sure as hell saw a lot of teams improve today. And the Cubs, I question whether they were one of them.
If you want to win the World Series, you make the goddamn market.
And that's a great point too. Like that is passive mealy mouth nonsense from Jed Hoyer saying that the market did not come to them. Like you're telling me you couldn't have gone out and made a move for a David Bednar. You couldn't have gone out and gotten Merrill Kelly. I'm not going to sit here and get pissed off they didn't get Eugenio Suarez. Like that happens. There were so many teams in on that guy, and it's just a matter, honestly, of what the Diamondbacks wanted. But the fact that you had all of these guys who could have potentially been moved and didn't move, I don't give a crap what the asking price is for Cabrera if it scares you, or if it's like Mackenzie Gore and they want Jackson Wiggins or they want nothing. Make a deal happen. That is what you're paid to do, and he didn't do it.
Nope. And the only thing, we weren't in the negotiations. We don't know what happened. But I will say the only thing I could say is if the Gore trade was Kate Horton or nothing, okay.
I can see that. I can
see that.
definitely see that. But I also can tell you it wasn't the case with every single control guy.
No, you can't tell me. And I mean, when I saw that the Marlins traded away Jesus Sanchez, I was like, okay, right field is open. There's where Owen Casey's going. Nothing. And, it sounded like, the Cubs were clinging to Ballesteros. They were clinging to this guy. Look, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You want to, in 2016, they needed Aroldis Chapman. It cost them Gleyber Torres. They knew they were giving up a really good player, but that's what you got to do. If you want to make an omelet, you got to break some eggs. Jed Hoyer wants all of his eggs intact in perpetuity.
And never
Now,
make a meal out of it.
no. And so now what you're going to have instead is you've got this group of guys that will probably amble into a wild card spot, be gone in a couple of games.
Yep.
And the one thing they're doing now is they're basically crossing their fingers on somehow Boyd and Shota get them through a wild card round.
Comes back and Assad comes back and Soroka somehow does something. Like a lot of things crossing going on at 1060 West Addison.
I will say this. The moves they made would have been fine over the winter. Those aren't the moves you make during the pennant chase, because a guy like Soroka, you could sit there and say, okay, he's a ground ball pitcher and he's gonna now be in front of the best defensive infield in baseball. So yeah, you're gonna see the ERA drop. You're gonna see him get a lot of outs. The whip will probably drop. He'll be okay, but he's still a back of the rotation guy. That's what he is. And
at best, by the way, at best, that is not like he has not been what I would consider a reliable starter this season for the Nats. He really hasn't.
I know. And what do you got to do? You got to count on Jameson Taillon. Before Taillon got hurt, his primary function this year was making sure everyone in the bleachers went home with a souvenir.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad that like the guys the Cubs got, like their home run rates haven't been that bad. At least there's that. I don't have to sit there and worry about that. And walk rates have been improving for guys like Kittredge. I think Soroka's had better walk rate this season. Like at least there is that.
Yeah.
They do get guys out by inducing soft contact ground balls and striking guys out. Like that is something that those guys do for sure. And a couple of them have, swing and miss stuff, which again, very good for a bullpen arm. You do want those underlying metrics. It's just, they're not World Series moves. They are regular season, get you into the playoff moves. And then after that, it's all kind of house money after that point.
Yeah. You don't win the World Series by going out and getting another sixth inning guy.
And you have to be more aggressive when you probably are only going to have Kyle Tucker for this one shot, and that is it. And like, I cannot abide by Jed Hoyer saying, oh, well, we didn't want to sacrifice for our future. Jed, what would Mitch Keller have been? What would Mackenzie Gore have been? What would Cabrera have been? Alcantara have been? Those guys would have been future pieces. You're not sacrificing future. You're helping now and then. That's how this works.
You actually accelerate the future by bringing in a guy who's already at the major league level, is proven at the major league level, and will continue to prove himself at the major league level for years. And Owen Casey, what's Owen Casey? Owen Casey is going to be Kyle Stowers. Yep. Are you really going to not make your move because you feel like you've got to have Kyle Stowers? And now what they're going to have to do, now that both Casey and Kevin Alcantara, are now both still in the Cubs organization, what they're going to have to do now is they are already sitting in the offices at 1111 Waveland saying, well, Kyle's gone, and we're going to have these two guys try to replace him in the aggregate.
That's literally the plan.
It is.
I'm sorry.
They have tried nothing, and they're out of ideas.
I was strangling my microphone just now, and Frank probably saw it, and our listeners and viewers who are on YouTube also saw it. But I just read Jed Hoyer's response when he was asked about fans considering that other teams were more aggressive. His quote was, "Our biggest focus wasn't trading that prospect capital in the bullpen. If we were going to do that, it was in the rotation." Jed, you didn't do it. You didn't do anything. Oh, God. This is so damn frustrating, man. Like, oh, good, Jed. I'm so glad you were so, cautious and stingy with your prospects. You got rid of, what was it, like your 13th best prospect, I think ended up being the best guy that got moved this entire deadline. By the way, I love that Taylor Rogers, the cost was basically nothing. Like, it's no offense to, last year's draft pick, who I'm totally blanking on the name on, and we'll get to it in a second. But
Von Brethowr?
There it is. I was like, it was so funny to me that he was the lowest cost guy that they got. Like, you had to give up, like, top 15 prospects for Soroka, who is, like, again, like, potentially a swing guy, most likely a long reliever type guy. Like, that's the guy you had to give up 2 prospects for. And you had to spend like $9 million on him. You had to spend $8 million on Kittredge. Like, come on, man. Like, what are we?
And Kittredge has an option. He has a player option.
Oh, which I thought it was a team option.
I
thought it was a team option. I thought they had a $1 million buyout on him next season if they didn't want him. And he's, 38 years old. Who knows if that's actually going to be the case or not?
Yeah.
Anyway, so we're going to go through the transactions here just in case, like, folks at home maybe didn't quite pay attention to them or whatever it was. The Cubs, again, got Soroka yesterday from the Washington Nationals. Questions about whether he's going to be a fifth starter, whether he's going to be maybe a long relief guy. I kind of envision him in that role of, like, they'd rather have him than Javier Assad or Ben Brown. They think he's more reliable in that type of situation. Has some flexibility, pitched really well out of the bullpen last season for the White Sox. Like, I see the logic in it for sure. They had to give up their 13th ranked prospect, Ronny Cruz, very, very young, raw player, definite lottery ticket feel to that. And then they also had to give up Christian Franklin in that deal. I thought that there definitely is some serious upside with Franklin, but I also have not been overly impressed with, like, some of his metrics this season. I feel like that was a very fair price for a Soroka. And again, I think you're going to see this theme throughout these conversations about the trades themselves. We think that individually they're smart moves, and we definitely see logic behind them. And Soroka is not an exception to that. Like, again, I'm not going to poo-poo him because it's like, oh, he wasn't the sexiest move of the deadline. No, of course he wasn't. He also isn't awful. Like, the move itself isn't bad. What they didn't do is definitively worse.
And, Soroka fits in with what I think when they actually do pay attention to baseball in the Cubs front office. I think one of the things they try to do, and it's worked to a degree, and obviously with Tyone it hasn't, is you've got 8 position players on the field, and this year 7 of them are plus defenders.
Yeah.
The one who isn't is the one with the 3 Gold Gloves,
which is so weird. So weird, dude. And I brought that up multiple times yesterday where I was like, hey, the Cubs' only negative defender right now is Ian Happ that they have out there on a regular basis.
He was a negative defender last year, and he still got the goddamn Gold Glove.
Apparently, it's a reputation, Frank. Didn't you know that?
Call him Yachty.
Ow. Ooh, I don't know, man. I think we just alienated our entire audience.
All 5 of them?
Hey, there's more than that, damn it. Claire's been giving us some good numbers, and I guarantee
we've got about 30 listeners in the first 24 hours. Thank you very much.
After this trade deadline, I guarantee there to be some pissed off Cub fans coming in for the first time, hoping to hear some of the anger that they're feeling. And by God, we are giving it to them, folks.
Yeah. I don't remember what we were talking about before I said Ian Happ sucks. That's what we're talking about.
Well, we moved past Ian Happ sucks. We need to talk.
No, I'm going back to it.
Fine, go back to it. Go for it. This is, you know what? This podcast, I didn't even give you an outline for this thing. I just decided we were to yell into some microphones for an hour.
So Happ sucks. And, one of the things he hit a home run yesterday. Bully for Ian Happ. He did his Kirk Gibson thing. But why didn't he go on the injured list? Why is he's clearly banged up. He's out there in the outfield. He's moving around like friggin' William Conrad. Mm-hmm. He's just waddling around out there. Get him to the IL. Get him healthy. Get
Owen Casey up here.
Well, especially now. You bring Casey up. Bring Alcantara up. You're not holding him out for anything.
And I guarantee you they're better than what Ian Happ's offering right now.
Oh, God, yes. I'm better than what Ian Happ is offering right now.
Frank plays softball, damn it.
Damn right. My 55-plus softball league, I'm an outfielder. I could do what Ian Happ is doing.
He's going to sit there, drink another shot of Malort, and tell you all about the glory days when he ran for 4 touchdowns for Polk High.
Yeah, right.
again, I think the deal itself is fine. Like, we're not going to sit here and say Soroka sucks. I think that's really reductive, and I don't think it's accurate. I think that there is a lot to like about what the Cubs got with him, again, with some of the underlying metrics and things. I see the logic. I see the design. Again, it is ultimately the final plan that we are not a fan of. So I think, again, you're going to hear that theme sounded over and over again in this thing. And I think another great example of that's going to be the trade with the Orioles that landed the Cubs Andrew Kittredge on Wednesday night. He will not be pitching for the Orioles against the Cubs. He'll be switching hotels. I love that story from Jesse Rogers today. That was really cool.
Yeah, he actually got a tour of Wrigley Field today.
He sure did. Also, they gave up Wilfri de la Cruz for him. I believe he was a draft pick. 2024 was in the Arizona Complex League. So again, just kind of another lottery pick type thing or a ticket type thing where like the Orioles are hoping he turns into something, but it was not a big prospect lost for the Cubs in that way.
Yeah. And the thing I like about Kittredge and Soroka, and this is the point I started to make before I went on my little Ian Happ rant.
The Ian Happ tirade brought to you by somebody, surely.
But what's his coffee company?
Oh, Connect Roasters.
Okay, so it's brought to you by Connect Roasters. Yeah, you'd think with all the coffee that guy drinks, he'd be more lively. But anyway, I digress.
He's like a hockey player, man.
Certainly not a baseball player.
Hey-o.
Anyway, back to what I was going to say. And I started making this point that the Cubs baseball pitching strategy, other than with Jameson Taillon, it hasn't worked. And a little bit with Shota is keep the ball in the park.
Mm-hmm.
Keep the ball in the park. The fielders will catch the ball, especially with Pete Crow in center. You will get outs as long as the ball doesn't get in the seats.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Soroka and Kittredge are both, and Rogers for that matter, they're ground ball pitchers. They're going to be in front of, you got Shaw, you got Swanson, you got Horner, you got Bush. These guys are not going to let a lot of ground balls through.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, these pitchers are going to be buying these guys Rolexes because they're going to be making them so much money.
Yep, agreed. I will say, Kittredge, if you go to StatCast and kind of take a look at what he's like best at this season, definitely look at his numbers with his slider. He throws the pitch a lot, granted, but the expected batting average against that pitch is only $180. He's got 29 strikeouts with it this season, whiff rate of 35%. Like, he throws the crap out of that slider. It is a very good pitch. Now, if he can't locate that and he starts throwing his fastball, then he's in a world of pain. But other than that, like the slider, excellent pitch for Andrew Kittredge. I can immediately see why Jed Hoyer was drawn to him for sure.
Yeah. And again, put him in front of the Cubs infield and you got something.
Absolutely. And obviously the Cubs are going to have to make some roster moves to kind of fit those guys in. I do not believe they have announced those moves yet. I think that they have been, they were sitting on it because they had a couple of open 40-man roster spots. They did have to make a couple of roster moves for guys that they brought in today. And one of those was Taylor Rogers, the third reliever that they did bring in. They officially announced that trade earlier today. Rogers had been traded. His brother was also traded yesterday. So both Twins traded on the same day. Neither one of them to the Minnesota Twins, ironically. But he had been traded to the Pirates, and then the Pirates immediately flipped him to the Cubs in exchange for Ivan Brethowr, as Frank had pointed out. Frank, another, I thought, really solid move. And then more importantly than anything else, the Cubs have now DFA'd Ryan Pressly to make room for Taylor Rogers on the roster.
Yeah, so along with the 4 additions, you've also got 1 addition by subtraction.
Yeah, that was, I'm interested to see what the other moves are. I'm sure they're not going to be very ground-shaking type moves. Like, I just can't imagine that, but definitely important. I thought that the Ryan Pressly experiment had run its course. It had a lot of, everybody had compared it to the Hector Neris thing, going into the season, and we certainly had done that too, I'm sure, but that is no longer going to be our problem. He is now out of here. Only throws 2 pitches, Frank. I thought that was very interesting. He basically only throws a sinker and a sweeper. His sweeper, great whiff rate on it. Again, very weak batting average against. Has had 25 strikeouts on that pitch. Really, really solid when he's throwing that well. Just the questions are about that sinker when he throws that, because that does get hit a little bit harder.
Yeah, and actually the biggest value that Ryan Presley provided the Cubs this year was the tutelage of Daniel Palencia.
Yes, I agree with that 100%, but that shouldn't be enough to get you a 26-man roster spot.
No. And, both he and Justin Turner have basically been player coaches this year.
Yes, absolutely. And Justin Turner's still on the team's roster, at least for now. We do have to wait to see what the final move is going to be to get our last acquisition at the trade deadline. That is 2024 American League All-Star Willi Castro added to the Cubs today. Frank repeatedly pounded the drum throughout this process. The Cubs needed a bench bat. They needed somebody who was going to be able to spell Pete Crow-Armstrong and, frankly, is going to be able to spell any of the outfielders that the Cubs have. They went out and got that. They got Willi Castro from the Minnesota Twins. Really solid, decent stat line this year, I would call it, as a .335 on base percentage. Has stolen 9 bases, not the biggest stolen base threat in the world. Does have 15 doubles and 10 home runs, though, so not a automatic out at the plate by any stretch. But I think that defensive versatility is going to play a big role for him. I cannot imagine John Birdie is going to be a Chicago Cub after tomorrow. I would imagine he's going to be the guy that makes way on the 26-man roster. The corresponding move was adding Miguel Amaya to the 60-day injured list. Even though Amaya is on a rehab assignment, you would think he's going to be coming up sooner rather than later.
Yeah. I think unfortunately, somebody who's been good for the Cubs has been Reese McGuire. And Reese McGuire, we've talked about it. Maybe they'll carry 3 catchers.
I think that having him, like a guy who can play third base also, maybe it increases that chance a little bit. By the way, hi to your cat. I have both of my cats off camera, your cat on camera.
Yeah, this is Ginger back here.
Aw.
Yeah, Fred, I don't know where he is. Anyway, oh, there you go. So black and an orange. Happy Halloween, everyone.
That's right.
Well, the other possible move is, you can always send Ballesteros back to Iowa.
Which, I mean, they could do, and it's not going to be the end of the world. But I liked what he did in Milwaukee on Wednesday. That's for damn certain.
Yeah, I mean, as I've already said, my preferred move would be Ian Happ to the injured list.
Yeah, and I think that if you're going to do that, you have to bring up Owen Casey. That's at least the way it feels to me. I did want to bring up Ballesteros. I think that we do have to have that conversation, and we'll talk a little bit about the Brewers series. I think that it probably played out fairly similarly to the way that we thought it would. There were definite areas of concern. They addressed them. They lost 2 or 3, but that's what happens when you go into a tough ballpark and play a good team. It's hard to win those series. We can get into that, but I thought it was very interesting that very early on the trade deadline day, the last day of this whole thing, we saw that report from Mark Feinsand from MLB.com who said the Cubs did not want to trade Moises Ballesteros. And when I look at their farm system, he's as much as I adore my short king. And let me tell you something, Frank, the fist pumping was off the charts yesterday when he hit the bases clearing double. I was so thrilled and happy about that. I love you, my short king. I was just baffled, honestly, that was the line that the Cubs drew in the sand. Was they were like, we don't want to trade Moises Ballesteros. It's like, him? Really?
Yeah.
The guy that you don't know what position he's going to play? I have theories about this, but I want to hear your reaction to that first.
I think they just decided that the Cubs needed a fat guy.
They needed the rec league softball guy. Damn it. Our Carlos Zambrano quotient has been so low lately. We had to get back to it.
They never righted the wrong from when they traded Dan Vogelbach away.
Hey, we got to have our beefy kings, man. That's how this shit goes.
That's
See,
exactly.
PG-13, Claire. PG-13. That is a word that would fly in a movie. My theory on this is that the Cubs wanted to keep Ballesteros around because they think they're going to have him potentially DH if Ian Happ has to go on the injured list, which I think is a fairly solid theory to think about. I also wonder, because they have been having him play catcher with some regularity down in Iowa, if they still think that is a viable path forward for him, because catchers are hard to come by sometimes in baseball. And the Cubs have not had a great track record of kind of generating prospects in that area. I know Wilson Contreras got generated in that area. I know Miguel Amaya has been really solid, but if you look overall, the Cubs have not had a plethora of catching prospects. If they think that he's going to be able to catch, I understand that like desire to keep him, but I was just really surprised that his was the name that ended up being, we don't want to trade that guy right now. Like that felt like a little bit of a shock to me.
Yeah, me too. And because he, AAA, that's really not where you want a guy learning how to catch.
No. You want them learning that in like single A and double A.
Yeah. So I'm not really excited at that idea.
And he does not profile anywhere else. Like I completely agree with you, Frank. Like, and I don't think the Cubs see him as a first base option either.
No, not at 5'8".
5'7". Put some respect on that guy.
Okay, 5'7". The guy's a lawn jockey. You don't put him at first base.
So, all right, like I wonder though, is he 5'7" in the same way that Patrick Kane was 5'9" for the Blackhawks? Because I guarantee you, Patrick Kane was not 5'9".
Yeah, like I remember going to a Kane County Cougars game, and I think Vogelbach was listed at 6'1", and I'm 5'10", and we were eye to eye.
Absolutely, man. I completely agree with that. I'm 5'9", and I thought I was real close to him. And by the way, we will do a podcast episode one day. I will do it. You measure me. I am 5'9". I am not lying about it.
Oh, it's weird.
Frank has seen me in person. He also knows this is true.
Yeah, and what's really funny is I'm 5'10", but if you ask anybody who's met me and has stood next to me, they will swear I'm 6 foot tall.
You are literally a bar bouncer, dude. Like I cannot believe that you're only 5'10".
I have bounced, but
hey, there you go. I figured it out. I nailed it, man.
I can't wear black t-shirts because
you're literally wearing one right now.
Because I'm in my house. If I wear one to the bank and I stand outside the bank, people start taking out their licenses and giving them to me. So I cannot wear a black t-shirt.
You're a lead singer of a metal band, dude. Like I just literally was sitting here like,
my love for you is like a truck berserker.
I teed you up for that a little bit because I kind of had a feeling that's where you were going to go. God, I love Clerks. What a movie. Well, Frank, we've spent 37 minutes getting agitated about what the Cubs did and didn't do
in a row.
I think we have to put a bow on it though before we get into kind of a little bit of that Brewers talk and kind of what's ahead. I will say,
dropped such a beautiful Clerks reference and it went right past you.
Did not. I just said I love Clerks. What do you mean?
Yeah, but then you said 37 minutes and I said in a row.
Oh God, no. It wasn't 37 minutes. It was 37 of something else. This again, PG-13 podcast, Frank. PG-13 podcast.
Look, nobody listening to us hasn't seen Clerks.
That's fair. That is fair. You don't have to spell it out explicitly for anybody. Like if you get it, you get it.
And if you don't, you're listening to the wrong podcast.
I was trying so hard. I wasn't trying to ignore you. I was literally just trying to steer it back to just kind of a nice place of like, let's evaluate. Let's have a cold, emotionless moment here where we can just say, what grade do you give Jed Hoyer for the trade deadline, Frank? Like all anger and piss offness aside, that's not a word. Doesn't matter. What is the grade that you give Jed Hoyer and the Cubs?
C-.
I was going to say C+. Like I said, I think that the moves themselves were good, and it's really hard to grade on something that didn't happen. Trying to prove a hypothetical, always a really tough thing to do in these situations. But based on what Jed Hoyer said and based on what happened and the guys that did get moved that the Cubs were apparently not really all that involved in, I think C+ is fair. I think that, again, the guys are solid regular season additions. They failed at their job of potentially getting them pieces that could help them win a World Series. And if Jed Hoyer thinks that he did that, he is completely off base, completely wrong. And then I start to again question why he just got a contract extension with the Cubs.
Well, because I think what he's doing is what the Ricketts want him to do, which is just get close enough to keep the money rolling in.
Fund Pete's gubernatorial campaign. Is that what that's going to be ultimately?
Pretty much. But from a baseball perspective, he had to make a meal, and all he did was put sides on the table.
Do you think there's any world where the Ricketts like handcuffed him again? I can't see that given how much money those guys are actually making.
I don't think they handcuffed him now because there's really not a lot of money passing hands now.
Yeah, it's all like prorated stuff. You're right.
Yeah, nothing. There's not a lot of dollars and cents that really take place at the trade deadline.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that there's, like I said, there's no way in hell money or they're not going to. I never really thought they'd pony up the money to beat other bids for Kyle Tucker.
Mm-hmm.
But after today, like I said, I'm sure Kyle Tucker is sitting there at home talking with his wife and saying, "Oh, I can't do this for the next 10 years. I just can't.
I do.
I like winning. I
Yeah.
like winning. I don't like to lose. I don't want to be in a place where losing is acceptable."
I think the Cubs are a good enough team after the trade deadline to make the playoffs. I think that ultimately is my verdict on this whole thing, is that they didn't actively make themselves worse in any way, but other teams made themselves better. And I feel like the Cubs merely papered over a couple of holes in their roster while ignoring the gaping hole in their wall that the starting pitching spot was. And I'm not going to get ticked off they didn't get Eugenio Suarez. You're damn right I'm going to get ticked off they didn't get anybody that could have helped that starting rotation. They desperately need that.
Yeah, right now they've got, Boyd and Shota are your 1 and 2.
And that's not a horrible thing given how they've pitched, but do you trust them to continue that through October? That's the question that has to be asked.
And, are you ready to, like, Cade Horton? I will say, if I'm going into the playoffs right now, Cade Horton's my 3.
I think that's 1,000% accurate.
Because he's been such a low pulse rate guy.
Yeah. But you also have to keep in mind, he's already thrown more pitches and more innings than he ever has in a single season in his career. And you're going to have to really start to manage those innings if you want him to be an effective pitcher in October. Every guy ends up hitting that wall, especially in a case like that. You got to be real careful with that. That's why they better pray to the baseball gods Javier Assad comes back and can make some spot starts for them, because God, are they going to need him to keep him healthy and safe this season.
Yeah, they've got to load balance. They've got to load manage him, and they've got to load manage Boyd.
They do, and Colin Ray to a degree too.
Colin Ray sucks. He's not going to be.
Well, that's the point, though. You can't keep riding him out there every fifth day. Eventually, he's going to break down. Like, you have to load manage him in the way that you got to make sure he doesn't completely F everything up.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah. You want to talk about the Milwaukee series? We don't have to get too far into it, but my takeaway is that they had opportunities, especially in that Monday game, to really do something when they got to Mizorowski early, and they just could not figure out a way to keep them on the mat. And it was by a mile Matthew Boyd's worst game of the season. That is something we have not seen from him at all this year. And then Tuesday just really Tuesday was such an annoying game. Like, I never really felt like they were going to win that game. Monday, I had like a little bit of a glimmer of hope. Tuesday, I definitely didn't. And then again, as they've done so often this season, they avoid getting swept on Wednesday. But, 2 out of 3 losses, you're a game back in the division. You still got that 5-game series coming up against Milwaukee in Chicago. It kind of went the way that I anticipated. I just kind of wish they had been able to win that game on Monday.
Yeah. And again, especially because Mizorowski gave up 3 runs. He threw 40 pitches in that first inning. I mean, you had him on the ropes. And
you scored. You didn't score by hitting the shit out of the ball or anything. You scored by manufacturing runs and them making dumb decisions.
Yeah. And I'm like, why are they swinging it? Why are they swinging the bat? This guy can't throw strikes, and they're swinging anyway. I mean, granted, it's easy for you and me to sit there and say that because we're not standing in the batter's box with 102 miles an hour in our eyes.
And that is what Mizorowski throws, and God, that is such easy heat, dude. That is so wild seeing that.
I know. But, these are Major League Baseball players. They see triple-digit fastballs. It's why they get paid what they get paid, and why we're sitting here doing a podcast.
That's true. Well, other than the fact that we're just, we're too handsome for that, we have to be on video camera.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, Patrick Wisdom has nothing on me.
That's damn right. Well, I love the joke you made about him the other day, by the way, where you were like, man, the Cubs should have held on to him. They would have gotten a good trade value for him this season, given what was going to kind of, it was no hit, all field third baseman. He was
yeah.
what he have gotten?
Yeah, Ryan McMahon and Brian Hayes.
Brian Hayes. Yeah.
Patrick Wisdom would
have
have
been
been gold.
By the way, Reds. We'll take Taylor Rogers. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, I hate to say that I'm disappointed by the result of a series like that. Milwaukee's a really good team. You can see everything about why they've been good is just they get like these timely hits. They lengthen at bats. They just annoy the crap out of you, and that is what they do. And again, Milwaukee fans are like, we're the best team in the league. Like, look what we just did to the Cubs. The only thing I will have to say to Milwaukee, this stuff's going to fly in the regular season. That is not what wins you games in the playoffs. It just isn't. Period. End of story. You do not win playoff series being one of the worst slugging teams in baseball. It does not happen.
Yeah. But yeah, this is what the Cubs were up against, and they got a really good look at what they needed to accomplish in order to compete with Milwaukee, and they failed miserably.
They did. Again, I think they got trapped into thinking like this is what we need for the regular season, not this is what we need for the World Series. And that is a failure of vision that I think we're going to be revisiting for quite a while, especially if this thing goes south at all for the Cubs this season.
Yeah.
All right, so the week ahead, folks, we will not be podcasting on Sunday since we did a podcast today, unless something, of course, crazy happens. The Cubs are going to be playing the Baltimore Orioles and Cincinnati Reds in home series, and then they hit the road to take on St. Louis and the resurgent Toronto Blue Jays. So that's going to be a lot of really interesting games, especially that St. Louis series now that they've kind of thrown in the towel on the season. The Orioles definitely have thrown in the towel on the regular season. They kind of sandwich that series against the Reds, who were buyers for some reason at the deadline. What are you kind of expecting in these games to come, Frank? I think that a 6-3 record is a very reasonable ask given what the Orioles just gave up, what the Cardinals have given up, the way their season's been going, and the fact that I still think the Cubs are better than the Reds even after the move Cincinnati made.
Yeah, I think 6-3 sounds about right.
Yeah, I think that Orioles series, the Cubs, I think, realistically should have a chance at sweeping that series again. Like, I know the Orioles didn't give up everybody. They sure gave up a lot of really important pieces. They're going to have a really tough time fielding a competitive lineup the rest of the way.
Yeah. And the one other thing we should probably take a couple minutes on is the passing of Ryne Sandberg.
Oh, sure. I literally wanted to wrap everything up so that we could have kind of unfettered time to talk about that. And I know it's a little weird. We got into it so late, but we kind of wanted to get to the news of the day and then kind of have time to reflect on his legacy. And Frank, I know that obviously I don't have to point out to anybody that you're a little bit older than I am. So you were definitely alive for the absolute heyday, the zenith of Ryne Sandberg mania at Wrigley Field. I wish I had been alive for that 1984 season because, God, you watch videos of that, whether it's the Sandberg game or literally any other moment. That season just transformed this organization and this fan base, got Wrigley Field rocking again. I love the Tribune column. I think it was Paul Sullivan did a column where he mentioned that there was a very strong argument to be made that Ryne Sandberg saved Cubs baseball at Wrigley Field by how good that team was. And Frank, I wanted to turn the floor over to you here so you could give some of your reflections and recollections of Ryne Sandberg after he passed away this week.
Well, the thing with Sandberg, there's actually two people in Cubs history who both passed away recently, Sandberg and Lee Elia. Elia was the first manager that Dallas Green hired. And in 1982, the Cubs had a weekend to celebrate Ernie Banks. And on Friday, they gave away these Red Lobster baseball cards. They're like paper, tear apart baseball cards. I have my set still. And to my knowledge, it's the first baseball card of Ryne Sandberg in a Cub uniform. And that was on Friday. Saturday, they had an old timers day. And then on Sunday, they had the number retirement for Banks. On Friday, they won the game Friday, and the Mets lost. So for the first time in years, the Cubs were not in last place. Not that they were contending, they were out of last place. When Lee Elia got introduced at Old Timers Day, Jack Brickhouse said, "Here's the man who got the Cubs out of the cellar." And people just went crazy for Elia and when the Tribune first bought the Cubs, their first thing was they had a slogan, "Building a New Tradition." And then they also had a commercial with a Cub that like comes with this big claw and tears at the screen, and the Cubs are out of hibernation, hibernation. So when they got out of last place, I remember a DJ, some Chicago DJ, I don't remember who it was, called the Mets front office and he's saying, "The Cubs are out of hibernation, hibernation. We're not in last place anymore." I'm like, oh my God, they're celebrating fifth place. But Sandberg had just gotten called up at that point, and they had him playing third. And I told my dad, okay, the Cubs have their third baseman for the next 10 years. This guy is really good. It's like he wasn't hitting, but you could just see that he was the real deal.
Mm-hmm.
And then that winter, they went out and got Ron Say. And my dad's like, "Oh, so much for your phenom third baseman." And then he went on to become one of the greatest second basemen in baseball history.
Jokes I needed.
But the thing with Sandberg, and it started in '83 and took off in '84, was the Cubs had some guys. They traded Bruce Sutter and they got Leon Durham. They went out, they got Say. When they got Sandberg, they obviously got Larry Boa. Jody Davis was a good catcher. They had some good ball players, some good young ball players. But you could just see Sandberg was different. He was just something else. And, like the great Cubs that I'd seen in my lifetime, Banks, Williams, Santo, were good, but they only had a couple of years left. This was the first great Cub that I saw that was still wet behind the ears when I saw him.
Mm-hmm.
And you could just tell he was going to be something. And then '84 came, and the Sandberg game happened, but just he was so good. I mean, it seemed like I was living in New York, and it seemed like every time I looked at the box score, Sandberg was 2 for 4 with another double or something like that. It was just ridiculous how good he was. And then I can't remember where I was when, and again, this is a trade. This is what you do at the trade deadline, listeners. The Cubs went and they traded Bill Buckner, who's a very good ball player. He won batting titles. He was an excellent hitter, but they had Leon Durham at first. So they traded Bill Buckner to the Boston Red Sox for Dennis Eckersley. I'm like, whoa, that's a serious move. But then the two top prospects they had, Mel Hall and Joe Carter, went to Cleveland for Rick Sutcliffe. And when they got Sutcliffe, I said, that's it. The Cubs just won the division. They won, like the first time in my life, I was like, the Cubs are winning the champion. I was like, they're winning the pennant. But that clearly did not happen. But that was my thought was, okay, they made the moves. They're going to win. And just everybody, when they talked about the Cubs, it was always Sandberg and the Cubs and Sandberg. And, obviously you can see I'm an Andre Dawson guy.
Yeah.
But he was different. He was amazing. He was great. He was like the next generation's Billy Williams, just the all-around badass in the outfield. But still, he had great moments with the Expos. He came to the Cubs, and then he had like years of being an aging player in Boston and with the Marlins. So Sandberg didn't have that. Sandberg had a negligible number of games in Philadelphia, but otherwise he was a Cub from almost the very beginning until the last day of his career. He was a Chicago Cub. He was a Cub through and through. And I was hoping we would get that with Anthony Rizzo. It didn't happen. Where you just have that guy who's just the heart and soul of the team. And even if he's quiet, and Sandberg, very quiet guy.
Yeah.
But there'd be times always remember watching him where he would just do these amazing plays at second base, and he'd get this little smirk on his face, like, "Yeah, there's only one person in the world who can make that play, and he just did."
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, man. Eat your heart
and
out, Joe Morgan.
and it was quiet. It was a quiet confidence. It wasn't like Pete Crow can do the same thing. Pete Crow is 100. He's a 1,000-watt bulb.
Yep. And God, do fans gravitate to him? Just like, honestly, like they did to Ryne Sandberg, even with that kind of humble attitude.
Oh yeah, because he's just so he just exudes excellence.
Yeah.
The way they go about it is different, but just they are excellent ball players. They are excellent, and it's so funny how many like Pete Crow at the All-Star game when they had him on the mic. Pete Crow just was on the phone talking to a cancer patient. Pete Crow is like he's that next guy where he's just not only is he one of the greatest players in the game, he's just such a quality individual, such a like you and I both know at least one person who named their child Ryne.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, we do.
Like that's the type of person Ryne Sandberg was. Well, he still is because the saying is you die 3 times in your life. The first time you die is when you stop breathing. The second time you die, if you believe in such things, is when your soul leaves your body.
Mm-hmm.
The third time you die is when nobody remembers you.
That's going to be
Ryne Sandberg will live forever.
And he should. By all means, he should. I was telling people this at work. I was covering the story on Monday night. I had the unfortunate duty to write about Ernie Banks after he had passed away. I was at the NHL All-Star game when that happened, and I had to do that for NBC. And it happened again this time where Ryan passed away right at the end of a shift of mine, and I wasn't going to go anywhere. Like, that's a story that you feel like deserves to be told, and the impact that he had on Cubs fans, this organization, and this city cannot be possibly overstated. And from a personal perspective, he was a guy who bridged a generational divide probably between my dad and I. My dad was very, very young when he had me. He was going to college when the Cubs kind of slowly started to kind of get good. He was, I think, 23 years old during that 1984 season, just right in the midst of where you're just going to have this lasting relationship with a team. And when I was born, Ryne Sandberg was already at the peak of his powers. It was a fait accompli that he was going to be the best player on the field on a lot of nights for that Cubs team. And even in the early 90s, as I was becoming my formative years where I really started to remember being a Cubs fan, Ryne Sandberg still held himself to that standard and still made those incredible plays. And yeah, Sammy Sosa had the flash, and he was the kind of guy that I immediately gravitated to, definitely like anybody who would watch Ryne Sandberg in the 1984 season. But it was so remarkable to have a player on the Chicago Cubs. All the history by that point. You ain't hiding from it once you're 6 or 7 years old. This team hadn't won shit in forever. This doesn't happen to us. And having a player like Ryne Sandberg on that team who was so good and so talented day in, day out, and with that humble attitude, that kind attitude toward everybody, toward every fan that he ever interacted with, it was a truly special thing. And even a kid at that age, I understood that. And my dad, who is obviously older than me and kind of had grown up with the Cubs and then had that flashpoint moment when he was still a young adult, to be able to share that with my dad was so critically important and so awesome. And to have that player who kind of bridged that divide really helped to bond us over the Chicago Cubs. And we always felt so strongly about Ryne Sandberg. We love him so much and still do. And seeing the news that he had passed away on Monday was a very emotional moment, definitely for me and for my dad. And it just reminded me of all those times going to Wrigley Field and seeing him play. And I know that generations of Cubs fans feel that same way. And I still get emotional kind of thinking about it and talking about it every time I remember that Ryne isn't with us anymore. And like you said, his legacy is going to live forever. And I'm going to smile every time I see that statue, every time I see that flag fluttering in left field at Wrigley Field. And I am so happy beyond belief that they're going to pay tribute to him the way they're going to do on Saturday with the blue jerseys, with the number 23 on them. That number, obviously so critically important in the history of Chicago sports because of Ryne Sandberg and Michael Jordan. But that is just going to be the perfect understated tribute to a man who deserves all of the praise and adulation that he ever got in his life. And I would be remiss if I hadn't shared that story about just the way my dad and I had bonded over Ryne Sandberg, who unquestionably was his favorite player and was my first favorite player that I ever had as a Cubs fan.
And the one story that I heard the next day that I just absolutely loved was Nico Hoerner, who, second baseman for the Cubs.
Yeah, please.
Asking Ryan, like, how did you take care of your gloves and like what kind of shape are your gloves in? And then the next day he comes in with a bunch of his old gloves. And you're like, oh my God, these are Ryan's. It would be like, asking Babe Ruth to bring in some bats.
Yep. Exactly right. I wish that, he had, obviously been successful in his battle with cancer, but I thought he handled that fight with such grace and such class. And if there's one last thing that I do feel like we need to say to folks out there is just make sure you're taking care of yourself, stay healthy, get checked whenever you possibly can. Like, these things are insidious. Cancer is an evil, evil illness. And Rhino, till the end of his life, was so adamant about making sure that you're taking care of yourself and, conducting yourself in that dignified, upstanding way. And it goes without saying, I'm going to miss Ryan terribly. He was a tremendous ambassador, and he really embodied what it meant to be a Chicago Cub and what it means to just be a good, upstanding citizen in today's day and age.
Mm-hmm.
On that somber note, Frank, thank you so much for riding through the entire gamut of emotions with us today. The anger, the understanding, and the anger over the trade deadline, and just that trip down memory lane with Ryne Sandberg. Really deeply appreciate these conversations as always. And to those of you out there,
this is what happens when we're fueled by Malort.
You know what? I would do it again in a heartbeat, buddy. For Frank, I'm James. Again, thank you guys so much for listening to these episodes of this podcast. If you have any sort of feedback, do not hesitate to yell at us on social media. Frank and I love nothing more than shooting the breeze with literally anybody about anything. And you know what? Raise a drink to Ryne Sandberg tonight, folks. You guys take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time on the Home Runs and Handshakes podcast.